Hi, I'm William Snyder, professor and chairman of the photojournalism program at RIT. And how was your first day? You have a good day? Yeah? Come on, come on, come on! That's what I like to hear. That's what I like to hear. All right, well, you guys and ladies are in for a really good treat tonight. It's a great panel. It's not for the faint of heart, though, but it is very good. It's covering tragedy in your own backyard. And it's being hosted, and head of the panel is Brian Thompson. He is the New Jersey correspondent for NBC New York. And he will introduce the rest of the panel to you, but just a little bit about him. He lives in Monmouth Beach. And so not only is he moderating this panel, but he also covered Sandy and the Newtown Sandy Hook tragedy. So we have somebody here who's also been in the middle of all of this. So without any further ado, here you go.
Thank you, Wim. Appreciate it very much. Hello, everybody. Thank you. I hope you find this valuable. I want you to be thinking toward the end of this program. I'm going to let you open this up a little bit. If you want to ask this panel any questions, feel free to. I do want to introduce them to you first. First is Michelle McLaughlin. She is a contract employee for Reuters based in Connecticut. She lives in New Haven. She has covered Sandy Hook School Elementary. She was, I think she told me, the second photographer to arrive on the scene there, which we all know what a challenging concept that was to try to get there and try to get anything in the very first hours. She, excuse me, also, of course, living in Connecticut, one of the three states that were hit so hard by Hurricane Sandy, Tropical Storm Sandy, however you want to describe it. To me, it was a hurricane, and it will always remain a hurricane. So she has had hands-on experience, lens-on experience with both of those. Next, we have Lucas Johnson. I'm just going to go through this real quick here. He is a photojournalist. Excuse me, did I say Jackson? Not Johnson. Okay. Thank you, Lucas. I'm sorry. One of those J names. I apologize. He is a staff photojournalist for Reuters. He is based in New York City. Interesting bit about him. He was once a commercial fisherman in the summertime out in California. Is that correct?
Alaska.
Alaska. And we all know that being a commercial fisherman is the second most dangerous job in the world, right behind a photojournalist. Is that correct?
Oh, yeah.
We then go to Craig Warga. He is a award-winning photojournalist with the New York Daily News, on the staff of the Daily News, I might say. And he has had more than just experience with Hurricane Sandy. He has also had experience with Katrina, so much so that his work was honored as Best in Show for the New York Press Photographers Association for a photo he took then. We also have Andy Mills. He is a staff photographer for the Star-Ledger. My bio sheet says he's a veteran staff photographer for the Star-Ledger. He's also the only person here who knows how to dress up, which is exactly what he did. He was, talking about veteran, he was a member of the Star-Ledger staff that was honored with the Pulitzer Prize in 2005 for breaking news. And then there is a ring that binds them all, so to speak, at least on the Star-Ledger staff, and that is Christopher Collins, who is sitting there at the end. He is the director of photography for the Star-Ledger, which means that he gets to sit on his derriere and tell everybody else to stand out in the cold, in the wind, in the rain, in the snow. It's the job that you all will aspire to by about the time you're 45 years old. He also was part of that award-winning staff that won the Pulitzer Prize for breaking news in 2005. The story, of course, back then was the 2004 resignation of Jim McGreevey as governor of New Jersey, when he had his famous statement. He came out and said, "And I am not, and so my truth is I am a gay American." The Star-Ledger did a fantastic job of following me when I broke that story, but I'll just pass over that. They did do a great job, though, I have to tell you. That for the months they dogged onto that story after it came out, and it was I was very pleased to be able to read their coverage day in, day out. It was a fantastic job. You've heard what our topic is. It is covering tragedy in your own backyard. And what I want to start off with is kind of when you know that something is coming big, in this case Hurricane Sandy, what do you do? How do you prepare for it? And I want to start with Chris at the end because he has a staff of 14 that he had to deploy. He had to tell them what to do. Chris, give us a kind of a thumbnail sketch. How did you go about telling your staff of 14 people, every one of whom went out on a Sandy-related story? How did you divide them up? How did you tell them to protect themselves? How did you tell them to load up on supplies? Can you give us kind of a brief summary?
Well, the first thing we did was get more help. We had 14 photographers at the time, and that's not really, it wasn't enough in our opinion. We've covered a lot of storms before. We've made a lot of mistakes, one of which is we tend to race to the coastline and wait for the storm to come. And we've learned over the years Bound Brook might flood or another town. So we had photographers stationed all over New Jersey, not just the shore areas. And we deployed people in teams, both in teams and as independents. So Andy pretty much worked alone and would catch up with reporters and tell him what he was seeing, and they would tell him what they're experiencing. Other people like Eris and Francis, who are here, worked with reporters and videographers as teams. And they did that in part for safety, in part for communication. And it had a lot of benefits. You know, when a car gets stuck in the sand, you've got two friends to help pull it out. In terms of preparing them, we've done this before. All the photographers travel with everything they need in the car, right down to hip waders and you know, what are those things? Goo and energy bars in case they get stuck and they need the nutrition. But most importantly is they use their brain. We count on everyone to just make the right decisions, not put yourself in situations where you become the news. And I think Andy got the closest to that, and I'll let him explain his experiences. But the important thing was to realize why you're there.
Let me ask Andy, who works for Chris again, just as a reminder, what did Chris do wrong? What did he not get right from your experience in preparing?
Andy's got a job he's got to get to.
What didn't he think of when you got down on the scene? Where did you go first, by the way, on Monday, October 20? Well, I know it was beforehand, but when the storm hit Monday, October 29th, where were you?
I was in my town. I live in Manasquan, which is a beach community in southern Monmouth County. It's right next to Point Pleasant to the south and Spring Lake to the north, Seagirt.
Did he think of everything?
We were well prepared. We knew going in that this was going to be a bad one. I mean, the OEM people that we deal with. I've been doing, you know, like I said, I've been doing this a long time. I've never seen them act like that, like scary. We were as prepared as we're going to be. We didn't know where it was going to hit. We knew it was going to hit New Jersey. We didn't know where it was going to hit. We knew it was going to hit somewhere in New Jersey. So we fanned out as much as we possibly could. The only mistake I think we made is being too spread out. Whereas maybe if we were a little bit closer to home, we could have responded quickly, more quickly, because. Like some of our experiences we spoke about with our New York colleagues here, when they came to Jersey, by the time they got to Jersey, it was locked down. It was a police state. I mean, there was no moving around. You had to use your own contacts, your own ingenuity to just get around. I mean, the National Guard, by the third day, the National Guard had everything locked down. They had police officers from all over the country. I mean, I ran into a guy from Mississippi. I was like,
Louisiana.
Yeah. I mean, like, there was no power. There was no communication was at a premium. And for those of us that were in the hardest hit areas, the Jersey Shore communities, we had no idea, at least for my own, I had no idea what was going on in New York City. I had no idea what was going on outside of my little world of destruction and chaos.
Craig, where were you signed on Hurricane Sandy?
Well, I live in Brooklyn, New York, and our whole newspaper the Daily News was flooded, and our newsroom was destroyed the night of Hurricane Sandy. So our experience was pretty interesting. I mean, the night of the storm, we didn't have a really strong focus. We wanted to keep our people safe and ready for the aftermath. But in the day after, our newspaper was gone. Our people were scrambling for space to put out a paper wherever they could. So we were actually left to our own devices to do whatever we felt would be the best story. So I teamed up with a colleague of mine who I've worked with a lot over the years covering some disasters, and she's a reporter. We said everybody's going to the Rockaways, because that was the big crazy story. You know, there was 80 houses burning, and we were like, I bet Staten Island is absolutely ravaged, and nobody's even thinking about it.
So there was no preparation for that from your standpoint?
Well, we were prepared for the storm the night of. I mean,
But you didn't know where to deploy yourself?
No, not at all, because the day after communication was done, the direction that you would get from your news editors, our news editors were scrambling to find a place to put together a paper.
But then let me ask you just very briefly, how did you know about Staten Island? Had you spent a lot of time there? Did you know that there were low-lying communities there?
You know that there's low-lying communities there, and it was just a hunch, too. I mean, if you look at a map and you look at the way that the water comes into the bay, you know that the Rockaways got destroyed. It's just kind of a, a good hunch that, wow, Staten Island is probably pretty bad, and nobody's really covering it right now.
I think the important thing to say out of this, though, is that your preparation was knowing the geography of the market that you're covering.
Somewhat, and also, also trying, I think the best thing that I did was also when everybody was rushing towards this one area, because there was, I don't know how many people remember, there was a community in the Rockaways, 80 homes burned the night of the storm. It was epic. But just saying, you know what, there's enough people over there, let's go see if we find something over here. Yeah, we were basing our decision on the geography and what.
Okay. Lucas Jackson with Reuters, based in New York.
Correct.
Where were you on Sandy?
The area that I was stationed was like the western side of Long Island, and it was the area that had been hardest hit by Irene when Irene came through the year before, because we knew that that area would flood, and we knew that that whole coastline would flood. And our preparation, our plan was basically, we had people placed so I was in Long Island, we had somebody who was going to deal with the Rockaways, we had someone who was going to deal with New Jersey, Michelle was in Connecticut, so we had kind of a rough framework of people who were going to kind of cover these different areas in not nearly I mean, we didn't have as many people as the local newspapers or anything like that, but it was kind of, what we do have is the ability to move quickly because we don't work with reporters a lot of the time. It's just the photographers. And so we were trying to place each other separate enough to where we could kind of work around that area and react to stories within that area without stepping on each other's toes.
Let me go to Michelle then. You had the entire state of Connecticut. Yes. It could have been the storm surge. It could have been power outages. You're sitting there. You know the storm is coming down on you. I assume Reuters gave you no other support in Connecticut. Is that correct?
I was pretty much on my own. I happened to know the local contract reporter for Reuters. We used to work together.
Did you tell Reuters where you think you should deploy? Did they tell you where they thought you should deploy? And how did that decision come about, whoever made that decision?
For this particular event, they actually relied on my local knowledge and gave me free rein to cover whatever I wanted. On a daily basis, it was, where do you think you should go? Tell us what part of the state you're covering today. And they really just relied on my knowing my communities, where I could get in, where I couldn't get in. And for 5 days, all the coverage came from what I told them where I was going to go.
And so the very first day, before the storm actually hit Monday night, it was high tide on the Jersey Shore, I know. What went into your decision making as to where you were going to be, waiting for that first photo op?
Knowing the geography of the state, having covered numerous hurricanes there before, so knowing exactly what areas flood. Going back to, first thing I did was go to revisit homes that I had met the owners during Irene that had been destroyed, and spent all day going back to their homes. And I was telling somebody earlier today, you walked up to somebody's home and I'm like, do you remember me from Irene? And they're like, yeah, come in and see the renovations. It's going to be gone tomorrow. And kind of started that way and hitting the areas that I knew exactly were going to have a problem.
So you knew the geography as well of your state?
Yeah. You have to. You have to know where you live.
You have to know where you live.
100%.
Let's continue this conversation on Hurricane Sandy, Michelle, and talk to me, if you can crystallize in your mind, What was the biggest difficulty that you faced right there in your own backyard over the course of the first, let's say, 48 hours?
Trying to navigate the streets, trying to get through the roadblocks. I know ours in Connecticut, we weren't quite as bad as New York, but getting past any police presence to get down into the communities, knowing what roads you could get through, what you couldn't, watching for power lines. I mean, I immediately started to travel in a team. Whenever I cover any kind of natural disaster like this, I will travel in a team, whether it's with another photographer or reporter, whether I just have somebody come and drive for me, so that you don't know when you're leaving your house at 6 o'clock in the morning, it's still pitch black, and there's no power, you don't know where the power lines are. And you have to be paying attention to every single thing, and that was kind of the biggest thing for me, was hitting the road that early while the storm was still happening.
It was really a
area.
personal safety issue for you.
Absolutely. I can't do my job if I go out and get in a car accident. I'm worthless.
If you die, you can't get that photo back to Reuters. Okay.
Yeah, and I will not get called again.
Remember that. That's a very important, for those of you who are just starting off in the profession, that's very important. I think all of us have found that one way or the other. Lucas, tell me, what was the biggest, or what difficulty really stands out in your mind in those first 48 hours after the storm had struck?
For me, it was kind of figuring out, and Reuters as a whole, because our news operation, we're not built to cover local news that well. We don't have a ton of local reporters. We're kind of centrally based in New York, and we deal with stories in New York for an international audience for the most part, although that's slowly changing. But for us, figuring out what was going on where was difficult, and kind of figuring out where you were going to go to cover something, because it wasn't like you could go to this town for a couple hours and cover what was going on there and then go to the next town for a couple hours. You had to spend a lot of time in one place just navigating, finding your way to get into the areas that were affected. And then you don't just want to run in and take pictures of people's homes destroyed. You want to talk to them and figure out what's going on, and you want to kind of introduce yourself to this community while you're working there, and that you can't just run in and do that. So it takes time, and you have to be very deliberate about where you go in trying to choose the places that are affected and that are really hard hit. But how do you know? It's just like Craig said. It's knowing the geography. It's talking to people. I mean, a lot of times I would go into one area, and everyone would be saying, "Oh man, you got to go to this. You got to go 2 neighborhoods over. Those guys got slammed." And so just by talking to people, you kind of work your way into at least what that area knows as the worst hit of the region.
Talk to people.
Yeah, it's a lot. I mean, you didn't want to run in and run out because you'd missed a lot of stuff.
Craig, most difficult in the first 48 hours?
Well, I mean, I think everybody would say that, you know, the basic things are really tough. You're wet, you're cold, you're running, you're working long hours. That's tough. But for me, the situation that was unique to me was that our whole newspaper was flooded and just shut down. So it really was, you know, you have to fight in see, you're on a much smaller crew. I work on a big staff. We probably have about 20 photographers. And you have to fight the urge as a photographer to want to run to the big, most important spot to make the best photos that you can, versus making sure that you're being responsible and covering the whole story. So for me, it was very important that I try and find a place where other photographers I didn't think were going, and where I could be useful. That was probably the hardest thing, and the lack of communication that we had with our newspaper made that very difficult. So probably, in a nutshell, the lack of communication, because we were a homeless newspaper, was the hardest part of it.
Okay, let me go to Andy then, and you talk to me about those first 48 hours and the biggest challenge you had.
The biggest challenge for me was I was living in a town where I had to prepare myself, my home, my parents' home, and prepare to cover the story, knowing full well that we might not have houses by the time the night was over.
Did you have a house when it was over?
I did, yes. My family had 8 feet of water in their house, and they stayed. They rode it out. In our town, when I'm not working for the paper, I work as a lifeguard in the summer up at the beach patrol, and so we evacuated they evacuated the beachfront and told people, listen, if you're going to stay, you have to give us your next of kin, you have to fill out this paperwork, and most people did that. when the storm hit, you know, we were hanging at the firehouse. Okay, this is going to be good. We'll get some people getting pulled out. You know, by about 6 o'clock that night, the 911 call started coming in from in town, and we were, you know, we got on the truck, a big deuce and a half, a military, you know,
2.5-ton truck. Yeah.
When we drove down Main Street, we were looking at each other, and the water was getting higher and higher and higher, to the point where we stopped in the middle of our town, not in the beachfront. The beachfront, we couldn't get to. And people are hanging out their windows and screaming help, and it's dark, and we lost power by that point. And at that point, it was, I had one camera, a 16-35, and you know, one body. I had to put the camera down and start grabbing people, because people were, you know, it was a dual role. Like, I was, you know, there to document the scene, but I couldn't. This is my town, and these are my friends, and these are my kids' friends, and Lord knows that. Like, my mother was in the, past that we couldn't get to. So for me, the first 6 hours were spent rescuing people and helping people and shooting pictures here and there when I could. But then it finally, you know, it occurred to me about 2 hours in, we were with people holding on, and we're looking down the street, and I could see the deuce, the lights on the deuce. And I said to my partner, Jay, who I grew up with, went to high school with, I said, hey, Bert, I said, if that truck loses power, we're dead, because I have no idea where we are. We had no idea where we were in our town. We had no idea what was going on. All we could see were waves washing down the street, and cars floating by, and telephone poles going down the street, and backwash coming out. And we were in full wetsuits with life jackets on up to our chest. And I was looking at Jay, and I was saying, you know, at some point we were going to have to just pull out of here. And we pulled out, got back, looked at the pictures, and I was like, I didn't know what to, the next day, I didn't know what to expect. I expected to see nothing. And
Let me, I want to spend another minute with you on this, because your situation is so unique. You were in your town. You said your mother was...
My mother stayed. She's, to this day, I'm not real happy about that. She stayed in her house. She stayed in the house that we grew up in, like I had 4 brothers.
And it had how much water in it?
8 feet.
8 feet of water.
We had a storm in '92, which was the barometer. I'm sure you lived there, you know. The '92 storm, we got no water in our house. We survived, and it's a beach town, you know. And my mom was like, we're going to be all right. It's just like last year. And I was like, Mom, listen. I said, an 8-foot surge. I stood up. I said, it's going to be, you know, this high. Like, you just come to our house, you know. Not, you know, just come stay with us. It's going to be fine. Everything's going to be good.
So here's the question, though. Here's your mother, stranded in a house, and you're at work.
We couldn't.
How do you cope with that? How do you deal with that? How do you split your time between what Chris is asking of you, what you know your professionalism is supposed to do, and your own personal distress? How did you handle that over that first 24 hours or 12 hours or whatever it was until you knew that your mother was safe?
You just detach yourself. I mean, you just switch it off. You go to professional mode. You know, we've got to do this, and you it's like being a trauma surgeon. You triage. You know, you got to do this, got to do this, got to do this. I knew this was history we were living. I had to shoot some pictures, but I also knew that we have to get these people the hell out of there, as many as we could.
Did you know your mother was safe? Or at what point did you find out?
The next morning, one of my other brothers came over to my house. It was probably 9 a.m., and I chained one of our lifeguard boats up to the train tracks. And if you know Monmouth County, the tracks are about a mile in from the beach. We chained the boat to the tracks, a lifeguard boat. And I said, Nick, let's go. We loaded everything up in the boat. We rowed. We couldn't row across it was called the Glimmerglass. It's like where the Manasquan Inlet is, there's this little creek in there where all the boats stop. We couldn't row across there because it was blowing still, 40 miles sustained. So we drove through town, got to the house, and as we came down the street in the boat, I'm looking at, there's my house I grew up in, and there's the water, and there's my mom. And I was happy. I mean, I was great, I was pissed, but I was happy to see her. Everything was fine. We tried to get the pumps going. We couldn't. The generators washed away. Everything, pretty much was, you saw the picture. I mean,
And what were you telling Chris at this point? As far as how much...
pretty much told him.
No, seriously.
Seriously?
As to how much work, how many pictures you were sending back, whatever.
I got to my mom's house, made sure that was good. Got up to the beach, and I was probably, despite what Brian Williams said, I was probably the first one up on the beach that morning when the sun came up. I know he, I'm sorry he didn't make it because he said he was the first. I was up there, saw the destruction, shot the hell out of what I could, got back there. prayed for a 4G signal, which, was weak at best. Sent up, I guess, 8 or 10, right? I mean, how many came in the first batch? And went back to, okay, we got to do this, got to do that, got to do that, and started to try to figure out what to do next. I had no idea, and we were in the same situation. We had no way of putting out a newspaper. Our operations were done.
Yeah.
I got a message to them saying, hey, we're still here. I know it's bad. I hear that half of Maniloki's on, because at that point, you could see where it was burning, but there was no way to get there. It was blowing northeast. So from where I was, you could see some degree of smoke. I think 80 to 90 houses burned on the Jersey Shore also.
Yeah.
But there was no way. There was no way to get in. There was no way to transportation. It was rowing a boat.
You had a helicopter, you didn't get there. All right, well, let me move on to Chris. And talk to me about, from your unique position, I assume you were at the Star Ledger at this point.
Well, I mean, that's sort of, if we're talking about the difficulties, we didn't have a newsroom, and Craig mentioned that. And what does that mean when you don't have a newsroom?
You mean it was flooded?
No, we just lost power, but without power, a newsroom today is pretty much useless. And
they don't have like huge generators or anything like that?
We do not. We do not. So what we were faced with, we have a newsroom that publishes the newspaper, and we have another newsroom that publishes the website. So we are trying to generate content for both. And when you don't have the print newsroom, what you don't have is a system for Andy to send me pictures. That's gone, and we weren't prepared not to have that system. So in the first day, trying to figure out how to take information in. When you don't have a newsroom, you don't have all the templates you need to print your newspaper as people are used to seeing it. And we had to, not myself, but our design team, remade all that from scratch. So we literally, to get a newspaper out the next day, built a newspaper from the ground up. And we were very flat-footed in terms of being able to take content in. Pictures today are huge. And when you've got 14 photographers plus at least another 6 freelancers all sending information in one direction, and you're not prepared for it, it's a big thing to try and manage. So that was really, from an editor standpoint, that was the most difficult part for the first day.
Okay, I think we have some pictures that we can show. Is anybody, Tom, do you have the control of that? Are these hurricane pictures now?
It's a mix from Reuters and the Star Ledger.
Okay. Let's see what we have here.
Like all your Star Ledger emails and stuff too. Yeah, ours was all too.
Do we have daily news pictures in there too?
No, there's no daily news in there.
Okay. Tom Costello really is good at this sort of stuff. He normally knows what he's doing.
Yeah, we were setting
He
up
just
like
doesn't like my computer.
Notice I use the term normally.
He's frustrated because my
kept on
photo
setting up-
mechanic is not the most
We
recent
kept on setting
version.
up new email accounts
Katie,
to email pictures into.
Jamie.
And they kept on getting shut down. Because
All right,
they thought it was,
now we're getting it.
Yeah. Well, they thought it was spam.
Yeah,
Because
I know,
they
they're all
would
in the back
set up, like,
hallway.
a photo desk at Hotmail. And all of a sudden they'd get bombarded with photos.
I
and it would
will
just
say
shut
for
it
the
down and
record,
set off like a...
I haven't a clue what you guys do.
Yeah, I should have.
Okay.
I was thinking about it.
I can barely operate.
Just upload it to that and just pull it over.
I can barely operate the camera on my little BlackBerry. That's how, and give me I have the iPad now, a company iPad, and it's like, okay, what do I do with this now? I'm called the dinosaur
Play Angry
of
Birds.
news, and I will soon fade away into some tank of gasoline somewhere, as you know, where all good dinosaurs go, into an oil well.
This is that older version? Yes.
That's what I'm trying to explain to them out back.
Classic.
They're not
Notice what we have here.
Classic version.
Okay, this is the Jersey Shore. That was Seaside Heights. Okay. Whose pictures are these? Do we know? Star Ledger? Or Reuters?
These are Reuters.
Reuters.
Reuters? Lucas, Michelle, you want to take us through some of these?
These are Lucas's.
I mean, yeah, it was just, it's,
That looks like Joey Harrison's from the helicopter. Yeah,
I wish I could have gone in the helicopter.
everybody does. Is that Staten Island or the Rock?
That's Maniloki, Camp Osborne.
Oh, that was Maniloki. Okay, there's a Casino Pier, the famous Jetstar roller coaster off there. The Jetstar,
See bright.
See bright, all right.
Spring Lake.
That was a boardwalk.
That
Maniloking.
It's still in the bid. The house
It's
is
still there, I saw it today. Maniloking Bridge and the inlet that was cut across Route 35.
Yep.
There it is, close up.
How's your town now?
They've closed it up there after a couple of days of frantic work by the DOT crews.
Union Beach.
Union Beach. That looks like the Rockaways, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's the Rockaway Pier, or Rockaway or Boardwalk.
Coney Island, okay.
Rockaways.
Wow.
Oh, beautiful picture.
Staten Island.
Staten Island?
Yeah. Long Island.
I'm seeing a lot of
That's when I knew it was a big storm, when you see deer washing up.
Right. Could you publish that, though, a dead
Yeah.
deer?
Yeah, we ran that.
We can't put a dead deer on TV, on Channel 4. I was told that years ago when I did a hunting story, and they said, but you can't show the dead deer.
That place was crazy.
What on earth is that?
That's a laundromat that had been
The
flooded.
guy was protecting?
Yeah, he was cleaning it up.
Okay.
That was
Playground
Long
in
Island.
Long Island?
Yeah.
Is that Breezy Point?
Manasquan.
Oh, that was Manasquan? That was good close-up.
8 feet of sand in the street.
Where are we there? Anybody?
That's Manasquan.
Okay.
That's a council meeting afterwards where they had to make emergency preparation.
Great shot. Yep, there it is. By the way, I tweeted that before you guys took the picture. That and McGreevy are my only claims to fame, folks. I gotta take them when I get them.
Some of our pages that we put out the day after.
This is probably showing them in reverse. What I was trying to do was show a week's worth of coverage in the newspaper.
Fantastic photos. Huh? It's interesting to note, Chris, how the photos, even in a newspaper in this day and age, can still take up, look at that, more than half the page.
How does the display compare to a typical?
Well, unfortunately, we didn't bring the paper here today, but you know, today I think you've got a 4.5 column photo on the front page with a secondary. I mean, it varies. It's you know, every day is a negotiation. You got to decide you know, which days you're going to fight for and which days you're going to let somebody else win.
Looks like you won these days.
Do you have a fight with your editors? Is that the end of our photo show? Okay. Do you have a fight with your editors?
One of my former bosses is here somewhere. Where's Pim? Pim taught me to fight. You know, I think fight's the wrong word. It's, you know, it's a negotiation. Some days you can walk in with a picture like this and it sells itself. You don't have to say anything. You just sit back and everybody wants to put, you know, 6 columns on page 1. Those are good days. There are other days where you got to kind of convince people. You got to make them see something a different way. And some days you win and some days you lose.
Okay, let's switch gears now because we said this is 2 tragedies. And of course, the other one also had the name Sandy, and that was Sandy Hook. And Chris, I want to start with you again. Why did the Star-Ledger go up to Newtown, Connecticut?
So
With, how many, 2 photographers?
we ultimately sent 2. So we were talking about this at dinner beforehand. You know, I think everybody was exhausted by the time Newtown came around. And, you know, we heard the news, we had the TV going. And the Star-Ledger chases news. We're not afraid of national stories. We've always gone out on a big story. As soon as I heard of the school shooting, I thought back to Columbine. We jumped immediately and sent somebody to that. And I think, you know, budgets are smaller. We question, you know, is this the time to go? And as soon as we knew that there was a New Jersey connection, we sent the person who was the closest, who happened to be Frances, who's here. And, you know, we had a stake in it at that point. And we sent Frances up and we followed her up with somebody else. And it was a New Jersey story in our opinion at that point. And my history says, throw the kitchen sink at it. And right that day, Francis was the kitchen sink. As soon as we realized that there wasn't a New Jersey connection, the shooter wasn't from Hoboken, I think in my gut, I knew that we probably shouldn't be there, but we were. We had reporters, we had photographers there. We photographed and reported back the school scene. But we also tried to find secondary stories in town. Francis spent some time at a barber shop, something a little bit offbeat with our reporter so that we could kind of supply something else to our readers other than the headline news, something else, how it's impacting the community. But at some point, we ultimately said, we do not belong here anymore. There's too much media, and we are not helping the situation. So we came back at that point. And it was the right decision to make. And you know what? Frankly, we probably should have made it a day or two earlier.
Okay, thank you. Andy did not go up to Newtown and cover that. But he did talk about something in his experience in Manasquan, a little bit about the professionalism that he had to operate under and the conflict with his own personal situation. So I'm going to jump over him and I'm going to go to the rest of our panel and ask about that issue in Newtown now, of the professionalism that you expect out of yourself, that you may have seen out of others. And I'll give you a little anecdote. One of my photographers, when I went up to Newtown, caught this. He saw a TV crew for German television. Now remember, this is a week or two, 10 days or whatever before Christmas, and they were taking a smoking break, big smokers in Germany. And so they, it was cold up there. I think you all remember it was very cold, do you not? So they were looking for a little shelter from, the wind. They were still outside, of course, because they didn't know what was going to happen. So what did this German TV crew do? They found a little nativity scene out in a park somewhere. It has a little background, the little shelter that was supposed to be the barn or whatever it was. And so there's these three guys sitting in the nativity scene with little donkeys and baby Jesus and Virgin Mary, and they're just puffing away. With that as a kind of a low water mark,
Yeah. Germans.
Craig, tell us about your challenges in being a professional in a tragic situation like Newtown.
Well, I took that very seriously in Newtown because, to back up a little bit, I grew up in a town called Southbury, Connecticut, which is right across the river from Newtown, Connecticut. And when I was a kid, I went to Catholic school in Newtown, and all my friends and family, all my childhood friends lived in Newtown. I had a niece who went to Sandy Hook Elementary School. So this was, essentially my second hometown. All my friends were from there. So when I got sent to go up there, I just had a pit in my stomach like I've never had before while I was driving up, terrified that I'd see one of my old classmates' children, that had been killed. So it was very different for me from anything I've ever done. And I really wanted to be professional and give my neighbors the respect that the story needed. And it was a different kind of story, too, in that, you cover a Hurricane Katrina, you cover a Hurricane Sandy or earthquake or something. You feel like your work is opening eyes and is letting people know how bad things are in places, and you can do some good with your work. But in the case of Sandy, it just devolved, Sandy Hook Elementary School, it just devolved to the circus.
Did you, and I'm going to ask the other panelists to address this too, the other two, but before I jump off of you, did you ever have to back off?
I never really pushed. I don't think I ever put myself in a position where I had to back off because I felt, it's probably the worst job I've ever done as a journalist because my whole attitude was I'm not going to push on these people. These are my neighbors. I was walking past the church I went to when I was a kid, and one of the parishioners yelled at me to go home, get out of here. And it's like, this is my home. And, I probably did the worst job I've done in my professional career because it was nothing but grief. And, did I pull myself off? I guess I pulled myself off the entire job in a lot of ways. I worked, I went and I covered things, but I didn't push the same way that I think I would on another story, I think, yeah, I think that's safe to say. I held myself back.
All right, let me move on to Lucas and tell us about how you exercised your professionalism at the same time. Did you ever have to back off as part of that equation?
I still wish you had this one photo in here. I'm just thinking.
Yeah, I got kind of jumped by the cops at one point. But there was so many media there that, like Craig said, that you didn't really push to get into a position where people would yell at you to back off.
But a lot of people did, and that was...
A lot of people did. The first day, I was at a different school, like the intermediate school, taking pictures of families taking their children, picking up their children. And I did it from a distance. I did it with a long lens. And actually, no one said anything at that school. But
did they know you were there?
They did. They knew I was there. I was standing in the middle of the parking lot. I had asked the police officers that were there if I could be there, and they said, "Yeah, just stay away from the door where everyone's waiting for their kids." So I kept a respectful distance, and like Craig said, I kind of worked that way the whole time. But it didn't matter if you were standing. We all kind of had a buffer whenever we would cover something, like we cover a memorial service at the church. The first day you were able to kind of wander around and take pictures of individuals, but after the first day, maybe the next morning, after that, there was defined lines that we had to stay behind. And even then, if you were across the street from like a cemetery where a motorcade with a hearse was going to go through, I got yelled at by 3 different people. Go home, your animals. But after the first day, it really affected me the first day, but after that, I kind of realized that was kind of my role. Like, I was the bad guy, and if people wanted to yell at me and they felt better about it.
You had to develop a bit of a thick hide.
Yeah, it was just, I had to realize, I realized it's not, this is something that is making them feel better, and maybe that's my role here because, I need to take these pictures. There needs to be a record of what happened here and what this town is going through. I'm not going to push anyone to where it's an uncomfortable situation, but if somebody wants to walk by and scream at me,
Did I hear police almost arrested you? Or?
They didn't arrest, well, the SWAT team showed up at a church.
That doesn't sound good.
One day. Not for me.
Not like the guardian angel.
No. There was some stuff that happened that you're just nobody had a clue what was going on. And someone called in a bomb threat to this church that we were all just taking pictures of people putting flowers down and showing up to the church. And a SWAT team rolls in, and all these guys, and SWAT teams apparently in the last few years have basically turned in, they look like military. Yeah. Like they're wearing camo and everything. It's kind of weird. Yeah. So these guys all jump out of this big truck and run in the church, and everyone's kind of freaking out, not knowing what's going on, so we're taking pictures. And they go into another building on the church grounds.
I was there that day, I remember that.
Yeah, and we're taking pictures, and nobody knows what is going on. Nobody knows why these guys are here. And then they start walking to a parking lot, and I actually didn't see them come in, so they started walking towards this parking lot that was across the church parking lot, and there was this other building. And I thought they were going back to their truck to leave, and so did everybody else, because everyone kind of ran along the sidewalk.
And there was a yellow tape or something, wasn't there?
We had like our area, and we were all within that area. And then the church property, we all thought, ended, and everyone was running along the sidewalk to take pictures of these guys. And an officer who had no badge, no uniform, and he was wearing like a fedora, just started screaming at me. And there's everyone else kind of running around, and he's screaming how I'm endangering his officers, and I was just doing one of these, like, I don't know what you're talking about. Someone took a picture of it. Everybody thought that was hilarious.
It goes back to what you're saying about you become the whipping boy.
Yeah, I mean, the guy was just stressed, like super stressed out, freaked out, and I just wound up being the guy that he chose to unload on.
Well, fortunately, you posted bail.
Yeah,
Michelle,
I got out of it, so,
Michelle, tell us about how you went through your experience in Newtown.
Oh, I think my experience was a lot the same, a little bit different. I was being in Connecticut with one of the first photographers on scene. Somebody at Reuters was paying attention, and they sent me as soon as they heard reports of a shot at the school. by the time I got to Newtown, we didn't even know what happened. The only thing we knew was that one person was dead. Nobody knew anything about the students or the adults. And I just started shooting. And just everything that was happening in front of me, I showed up, it was really calm. Not a lot of noise down there, no sirens. And so you're just kind of in a daze. I'm shooting, I'm start editing. I'm sitting in between two police cars sending photos. A cop comes over, he's like, do you mind moving? I have to unload my weapon. And I'm like, yeah, do I need to move my computer so you don't shoot it? You know, it's like very quiet. The next thing, about an hour and 15 minutes later, we started finding out what happened. See all these parents coming out crying, and I had moved probably 12 or 15 images to the wire, and one of them was the photo of the two kids embracing up here. Didn't think about it. I'm like, it's a school, they're kids, you know, it's about the kids. Holding a father's hand as he's finding out that his best friend's kid was just killed, and I started receiving death threats and tweets calling me every name in the book, that I was a scum-sucking C-word, you name it. And that's kind of how my experience out there started, was for the next 24 hours, while I'm out there shooting, just constant emails, phone calls, had to turn off my phone, and it just kept going and going and going. And so I felt like I was living in a fog for the first week of covering out there. Till, I mean, because everybody started coming up, the rest of the team started coming up within hour and a half,
Yeah.
I think, of when I got there. Because as I was driving out there, I was just being passed by state trooper after state trooper. And the bureau in Toronto and New York were just on the phone constantly. What's going on? What are you hearing? What are you hearing? So within less than an hour, we had a full team being dispatched.
But this is before you knew the dimensions of this.
Way before we knew what was happening.
What were you thinking at that moment when you saw all those troopers just passing you? Unbelievable.
That something was going on that we didn't know about.
You thought it was bigger than what you knew.
Absolutely. I mean, it's really, Craig's, it's really small, one-lane roads going out to this quaint little town, and I must have been passed by about 28 state troopers.
Were you scared?
No, I don't think scared. I think I was just trying to figure out what was going on, trying to listen to the news, listen to the radio, and trying to get grasp of what might be happening. Because this was not a town where you expect this to happen.
Let me wrap it up with a final question before we open it up to the floor here, because I don't have a lot of time left. I want to start with you, Michelle. Talk to me now in retrospect. Now, you covered two major events in your backyard, where you live, in many cases, people you know. Talk about post-traumatic stress disorder. As a human being,
I start with that one, huh?
yeah, you get to start with that.
It is a really serious issue for photographers that I don't think we talk about enough. Almost every photographer living in the state of Connecticut that I know, and every reporter, is suffering PTSD right now, not only from the hurricane, but especially from Sandy Hook. And it's something that we all need to address. It's something you need to take very seriously. I mean, this event, I went through and didn't cry for a long time. Then I started to feel the guilt of why am I not crying? Then I would break from, being yelled at for random reasons. And then you find yourself getting very angry for no reason. And it's, oh my God, I could go on for hours about this, especially right now.
But how have you coped with it then in these, it was December 14th, January, February, March, 3 months since then, and at the same time having experienced Sandy the hurricane. How do you cope with it? What do you do? Do you just shove it out of your mind? Do you address it at points?
Talking to other people that have gone through it. There's so many people that have been through other events, whether it's wars, Katrinas, whatever, and everybody has a little bits of advice to get through it. And the DART Center for Trauma, Journalism Trauma is phenomenal. They reached out to every photographer in the area, and I actually have their trauma books with me if everybody wants to take them. It's a great little resource on how to deal with this stuff. You have to talk about it and figure out what the best way is for you to deal with it. I'm constantly getting emails from another photographer that's going through serious PTSD because she had the very same experiences that I had, and you have to open up and be honest that I'm human. I witnessed something where I live that sucked, and there's nothing that you can do about it, and you're gonna have nightmares.
Lucas, have you experienced any of this? Do you block it out of your mind? Is it an issue for you?
I mean, it was more of an issue at the time until I kind of figured out a way to justify. Like with Sandy, I wasn't, where I live, we weren't flooded. We didn't have, we didn't lose power. So there is kind of a guilt associated with going into the areas where people are super affected, taking pictures and knowing that you're going home to, you go out to dinner if you wanted to. It's difficult to justify that, but I get through it basically by always having, if I can fight myself to the justification of why I went there and why I was there, then for me it's a lot easier. Sandy Hook was really hard though. I mean, once I kind of got to the point that I realized someone has to take these photographs, this needs to be recorded. It can't just, and most people actually that yell at you have very little to do. They're not directly connected to the actual event. It's people that are kind of doing their civic duty, protecting someone else. And you saw that some of the families started coming out and being very open about what had happened. But as long as I can kind of justify my presence there and justify the presence of a journalist there, then I find it helps a lot. I mean, you have doubts that things you might have done incorrectly or that flashbacks or memories and things, but it's not, for me it hasn't been as extreme, but I haven't had a reaction like Michelle has either to a photograph.
Greg, you want to tackle this?
Yeah, I think I echo a lot of what Lucas is saying. It's all about how you justify your presence being there. Sandy, there definitely was some guilt, because I remember in the morning of Halloween, at sunrise, I was up to my waist in water with people digging out of their houses. I came home that night, I took my kids out to dinner and then trick-or-treating. So there was definitely some guilt to it. But at the same time, like during then and like the earthquake I covered and Hurricane Katrina, like if you feel like the work you're doing is important and is helping people, you take home a little baggage from it, but you justify the baggage and you get over it because you feel like you did something good. And, I believe in that. And Newtown was the only, maybe not the only, but I seriously questioned whether there was a purpose for me to be in Newtown. And I don't think I've really felt that way that strongly in my whole career. And, I was just, every day I was like, there's no reason that I need to be here. There's enough wire photographers here. That's probably wrong in light of my profession. Maybe I need to justify, maybe I need to change the way I think a little bit, but that's how I felt and I couldn't help it.
You can't help how you feel.
Yeah.
Andy, have you forgiven your mom or has she forgiven you? I'm not sure which one to ask, but have you, obviously you experienced some of this.
Actually, yeah, Sandy Hook was my breaking point. It had been about 6 weeks without a day off. I was in, I like everybody else, I saw the CNN and the NBC feed from live from Newtown. I was watching that. I went to Home Depot and was getting some installation. I remember exactly what I was doing. I was pulling some insulation, putting on, little orange carts, and the AP news, news whatever it is update came through, and I looked at my phone and it said, Newtown school shooting update, 23 dead, 20 children. And I just sat down in the car and I just started crying. And people were like, "Are you all right?" And I was like, "No, I'm not." And a long time ago, somebody who was in this business said to me, he said, you're going to see things you don't want to see. You're going to do things that you don't want to do. But at the end, just remember what we're doing is a noble profession. We're here to record history. We're here to play a role. We're not here to grieve for people. We're here to tell a story, to document the news, and then move on. When, you're pulling your neighbors out of houses that are collapsing and you're seeing children being executed for no reason, I have a hard time justifying anything we did. I heard the horror stories from you guys, and I how do you deal with something like that? I don't know how you guys did it. I know one thing, that if my phone would have went off and Chris would have called me and said, "Hey, we need you to start heading north," I would have said no. And I don't think I've ever, in almost 20 years, I don't think I've ever said no to anything.
Chris, you've got to make a lot of decisions for a lot of people and put them into either harm's way or into a tragic situation like this. Does this feeling ever overcome you of a sense of what am I doing? What am I doing to these people? What am I doing to the public?
Absolutely, because I realize it's a great responsibility. And there's also, you know, we talk a lot about the post-traumatic stress for photographers out in the field, but there is a lot for the people that are back in the newsroom. You know, as a photo editor, I'm inundated by photographs from around the world every day, and I am the filter for everyone who reads the Star-Ledger. And that's a big responsibility. I see things that I know I can't publish, and I bring that home. And there's a lot of stories, you know, one recently that really hit home to me. And, you know, I need to find an outlet for myself. But to being a manager and thinking about, you know, Sandy and actually how Andy and I work together, you know, each night I would sit down in my kitchen without heat, without hot water, without light, and I would plan what the photographers are doing the next day. And I think Andy and I always had the same conversation. And that is not, I want you to go this, I want you to come north. I think it started out with something to the effect of, are you working tomorrow? And he would tell me, and I would respect that. You know, if he would tell me he's only got an hour in the day where he can contribute, like, that's great. Or if he said, you know, I really need to be off today and do this, I didn't question it, because we'll find another way. You know, we'll tell a different story that day. I mean, this story is 5 months since Sandy hit. We are still telling this story, and we will be for another 5 months.
I was doing a Sandy story again today. Virtually every day I'm out there, I have at least one person come up to me and say, thank you. Thank you. The hell that they're going through. And sometimes I think I'm showing their destroyed house. I'm showing their destroyed lives. Who the hell wants that laundry, if you will, hung out for the whole world to see? They're craving for it. And so I would say to you that know that either you have to do something, even though it may be distasteful, as so many of these panelists found out in Newtown, to the people who are the victims there, or you're doing something that people have to have you cover. And actually, to a lesser extent, that is true with Newtown. People couldn't recognize it right away, but you've seen some of the victims' families now come out, and they know that that has to be covered. And that's what gets me through this whole concept of, you know, being in the middle of a tragedy. And I would just leave those words. And now it takes me questions. Right here.
There's going to be possible to have a national database for PTS people in the press corps who are going, and other people who are police officials, because when a police officer sees something tragic like suicide by a cop, they have someone to talk to. They get debriefed. We go home, and that's we just kind of deal with it as we deal with it.
Has anybody heard any progress on that in the profession?
I mean, I think that depends on who your employer is. Right. Especially after Newtown, there was so much support coming out for photographers, and almost immediately between DART and organizations. I mean, I know every photographer, even contractors that I know that were there, our organizations immediately reached out and said, we have somebody if you need it. And so I think it is becoming a much easier thing. I don't think we're ever going to see a national database, but I think that we have the resources that are there. We just need to use them. I mean, I keep mentioning DART because I know so much about it, and I know we have some DART people here as well, but it's the best place to go. They are there with support at all times, and just not enough people know that it's available to us.
And it may be important also to seek out any organization you work with and tell them, you know, you want somebody to talk to about this. I've got a question right here.
The question is for Chris or Mr. Johnson or anyone else on there. There's a lot of young students here in the room. What advice would you have for them if they want to go and cover some sort of natural disaster thing in their backyard?
Well, I think the first question you have to ask yourself is, why would I do that? Just because it's near you doesn't necessarily mean it's something that, a place that you need to be. You know, what is your stake in the news event you're going to go shoot? If you're going to go, let's just say it's a fire in the town you live in, and it's a very small town. Well, you know what? You're the eyes and the ears. You're the people you're the person that's going to go and report that story. On a national level, God forbid if Newtown happened down the road and this convention were going on, how many photographers would be there? Way too many. And when there are too many photographers, what immediately happens is the authorities take over and they make it, as Andy said, a police state. And you see a lot of that here in New Jersey. So, to students, my message is, what does your instinct tell you? Do you belong there? In Newtown, there was a point at which, and I just said it, we didn't belong there, and we needed to come back. So everybody has to kind of have that in the forefront of their mind, and I think there's a little self-check that each and every one of us has, and especially I wasn't in Newtown, but there's a point at which people need people need time to deal with what's going on, and if your presence, if you feel in your heart that you're being intrusive, chances are you are, and you need to be aware of that and know to walk away, because no picture is worth that.
Did you want to say anything?
On a more practical note, we were discussing in the bar before, if there's ever a natural disaster, the first thing you do is go to Walmart and buy as many gas cans as you can.
And take out cash.
I got another question right here in front.
Yeah, for Michelle. Okay, I've covered a ton of kids being killed in Philly and Camden, but when it's just me, or maybe just me and a couple of, when it's a smaller scale thing, I'm able to hug the people, to say I'm sorry, to sort of talk to them about what their child was like, and usually, they're very good to work with. I guess what I'm wondering is, had there been fewer photographers, had there been fewer media in Newtown, do you think that it would have been as upsetting to people, because there were so many of you guys, did it make it harder to kind of have that contact with the people? Because I remember also reading somebody in Newtown, subject of a photo, said, it was worse because no one talked to me. So.
Did you hear that in back, the question? Everybody hear that? Yeah. Okay. Who wants to take that from Newtown? Lucas, you want to take it first?
I did hear that from people, but a part of the reason that the media was distant in Newtown was the police there kept us back, and there was a lot of people, but B, I think a lot of it was that was us trying to keep our distance and trying to be respectful. I mean, one woman stopped on the side of the road. I was the cemetery thing. I was across the street. I was probably 300 or 400 yards away from a cemetery to take this photograph from a distance of cars driving through it. And in my mind, I was as far away as I could possibly be, as far removed from the situation as I could possibly be. And this woman driving past felt that that wasn't far enough. So it was kind of difficult because you were trying to keep your distance, and in doing so, you were kind of creating that wall of space between you. So I don't know that there's an answer for that. And like you said, if there's less people around, or if it's a more intimate situation, you're able to engage them. But that just wasn't possible there.
I was going to say, you had the moments where you could get close to people. I was down at the firehouse a lot, and before everybody showed up, or early morning, late evening, if there was a smaller group, you'd get local residents coming down. Even a week later, they would hug you and thank you for still being there to tell the story. And then you'd go up the street and get yelled at by people that were from out of town, or get nasty emails from a guy in Oregon who thinks that this actually didn't happen. But you had this, let's not even get into that. But the photo that Lucas has, that's yours of the hearse, right?
Mm-hmm.
I shot that same area the day before, and there was nobody there. It was really peaceful, just a couple flowers in the sign. And some local residents came by, they were walking, and they all came to put flowers down. And it must have been almost a weekend, and started talking. There's 6 residents, and they all thanked me for being there, and I told them who I was working with and how many of us were in town, and each and every one of them said, our homes are open to you and your entire team. We will cook you dinner if you want to call us, whatever you need, if you need showers. So you had the moments where you could get that, but not enough, because
And
we're all in the same spots.
I think Michelle will get the final word. I'm sure,
do.
I understand that there's, I knew I was setting myself up with that. I understand that there may be some liquid refreshments afterward, and so if you want to come up to them, talk to them individually, they're hardened photographers, so we know that they are going to stay for at least a few minutes, but I want you all to thank, please, Michelle McLaughlin, Lucas Jackson from Reuters, Craig Warga from the Daily News, Andy Mills, and Craig Collins from the Star Ledger. Thank all of you.